Hello, I'm Beryl Dov Lerner. I teach philosophy at the Western Galilee College in Israel. This is my lecture, The Land of Israel in the Thought of Meir Simha of Dvinsk and its recent political deployment. I'm going to narrow the range of my topic and focus on the appropriation of Meir Simcha's thought by Yeshayahu Leibovitz. So first of all, who is Rabbi Meir Simcha Cohen of Dvinsk? He was one of the greatest rabbinical figures in Europe of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, famous for his two works, Or Sameach, which is his novelle on the Maimonides' Code of Jewish Law and the Mishneh Torah, and Meshech Chochmah, which is a commentary on the Torah and the first 5 books of the Bible. And this contains many of his philosophical and theological ideas. Yeshayahu Leibovitz is probably known to whoever is attending this conference, perhaps the leading public intellectual in the history of the state of Israel. And he's he was a religious man, began as a religious Zionist who was interested in Israel becoming a kind of a halachic democratic state. But later he became, first of all, after the 1967 war, a severe critic of Israel's control over the West Bank and Gaza and of the settler movement. And he wanted a strict separation of religion and state in Israel. And as we shall see, he heavily criticized the religious Zionist ideology stemming from the thought of Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook and his circle, which founded the Gush Emunim movement, and their belief in the intrinsic holiness of the Jewish people, of the land of Israel, of holy sites, and so on. I'll take my quotes here from Leibovitz's work, from the translation of a selection of his work edited by my neighbor, Alav HaShalom, Eliezer Goldman from down the road in Kibbutz Eliyahu, Judaism, Human Values, and the Jewish State, which was put out by Harvard University Press in 1992. So here is a passage from Leibovitz showing his use of Meir Simcha's work. At this point, it is appropriate to quote one of the greatest Torah scholars of recent generations, a man of true piety who devoted profound thought to the subject of faith, Rabbi Meir Simcha Cohen of Dvinsk, the author of Meshech Chochmah. The contention that, quoting from Meshech Chochmah, there is nothing holy in the world, only God, exalted be his name, is holy, and he alone is worthy of glory and worship, is repeated frequently and with great emphasis in the book. For example, there's no holiness in any creature, only in the creation, only in the Creator, blessed be he, all things, the land of Israel, Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, the temple, the tablets are not intrinsically holy, and they are not sanctified except by the performance of the mitzvot. Consequently, when Jews repudiate the Torah and violate the mitzvot, they are all deprived of holiness and become profane. He makes this point insistently: do not imagine that the mountain is a holy thing, that they should not suppose that there is sanctity inherent in the building itself, and do not imagine the tabernacle and the temple are holy things unto themselves. Other passages in the same vein may be found in the work, Meshech Chochmah. It is as though he foresaw the religious Jews, the followers of Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook, 50 years after his death, would degrade and violate the notion of holiness by taking advantage of it as camouflage for the satisfaction of human needs and interests, whether private or collective. Now, I think to understand the difference between Leibovitz's views and those of Meir Simcha himself, you have to understand Leibovitz's rejection of the religious value of nationalism. And here I bring up 2 points. First of all, his rejection of the Jewish people as understood in the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. And here's a quote from Leibovitz's book. Of the 2 great distortions of Jewish faith, the first was the Kabbalah, which converted the obligation imposed upon the Jewish people into a vocation affecting the cosmos and God himself. This is a Kabbalistic idea that by performing God's commandments, Jews can affect the coming of redemption, can restore harmony to the cosmos and to the Godhead, etc. The actual Jewish people, which under natural conditions is bound by Torah and practical mitzvot, was identified by the Kabbalah with the mystical notion of Knesset Yisrael, the soul of the nation in Rabbi Kook's words, which is identical with the Shekhinah, Kabbalistically identified with the last Sphira, that of Malchut. Where we're talking about here, Malchut being the lowest element in the Kabbalistic Godhead, the one in which that allows for the communication between the Godhead and the created world. Now, the Sphira Malchut is related to the sixth Sphira, Tiferet, splendor, which is represented by the patriarch Jacob, who is Israel. I should mention also it's associated with Torah. Therefore, the pagan trinity of the Holy One, blessed be He, the Torah, and Israel. He sees this as a false trinity coming out of Kabbalah, which has been appropriated by recent religious Zionist ideology. And here, Jewish nationalism itself, as found in Zionism, has no religious value. For Leibovitz, Zionism has no connection to Judaism in its essential religious sense of the obligation to observe Torah and mitzvot. This is an absolute obligation imposed upon us regardless of particular historical circumstances or existential conditions. Zionism has no bearing on it whatsoever, since this task is binding on us in our land as in exile and freedom as in bondage. And the effort to fulfill it continues and will continue so long as there are Jews who recognize it. He is a Zionist, however. Zionism as an aspiration to political national independence is a legitimate Jewish aspiration, and the state is dear to us as its fulfillment. But it must not be given a religious aura. Only what is done for the sake of heaven has religious significance. So, how does this differ from the thought of Meir Simha himself? I contend that Meir Simha had a communal vision of Judaism in which, unlike what we find by Leibovitz, the Jewish individual is not the only agent of the performance of God's commandments. Rather, he thought of the Jewish people as a communal whole, was a kind of collective agent, which was important for the performance of these commandments. And therefore, the condition of the collective itself is important for the possibility of the Torah being realized in the world. I would add, before I continue, that I think Leibovitz has missed an important point of his Maimonides, who he sees as the bedrock of his own views, and that Maimonides, in describing the Messianic era, makes it very clear that material, political, and military conditions have an important effect on the ability of Jews to perform mitzvot, to gain knowledge of God, and that Judaism cannot simply be reduced to something that is done performed to whatever extent is possible wherever you are, but rather there are situations in which it can be performed more completely. So here is a quote from back to Meir Simcha in Meshech Chochmah. He starts off with things that Leibovitz approves of. The holy places are not grounded in religion, but rather in the nation and its roots. Aha, the nation. As in the case of Mount Moriah, where Adam was created, and there Abraham sacrificed Isaac, and so it was chosen by a prophet as the site of the temple. Religion only writes about the place God will choose. It does not mention that this will be necessarily Jerusalem. As for Mount Sinai, the place of religion, as soon as the divine presence left it, the sheep and the cattle could ascend it. God forbid that emotions mislead us to attribute any image to religion. So this sounds like Leibovitz, but the significance of Jerusalem and all the land of Israel and Mount Moriah is built upon their relation to our fathers, the roots of the nation, and to unite the nation so that all emotions be directed to the unity of the nation. So Meir Simcha is very concerned with Jewish unity, which would seem to be a political concern. And here in another passage, we see why he's so concerned about this. The Torah's telos relates to the collective and the communality in which each individual is affected by his fellow and ascends through him. Therefore, the community ascends more than 10 times as much as the individual. I can't go into details here, but Meir Simcha is saying that that the individual's realization of the commandments, his progress in Jewish spirituality takes place as a member of the community. He is affected by his fellows, and he is also here talking about the community itself, the Jewish people, as a kind of moral and spiritual agent which ascends more than the individuals do. How does this work? Here is a quote, another quote from Meshech Chochmah, in which he talks about the temple, which we will remember, the temple has no inherent holiness, but here we will see how for Meir Simcha, it plays a very important religious role through its effect on the condition of the people Israel. The purpose of the temple is to unite the whole of Israel and their hearts to one place, and he mentions how all Jews, wherever they are, always pray towards the direction of the physical location of the temple. And therefore, it was always under miraculous governance, as they counted 10 miracles which regularly occurred at the temple, that's in Pirkei Avot, and to show that while each individual Jew was unworthy of enjoying individual supernatural providence, even so, the general connection of the people Israel is worthy of miraculous providence. For it, the people Israel, which here is the existing Jewish people and not some kind of abstraction which has nothing, which Leibovitz would claim has no real bearing on the historical Jewish people. The Jewish people is worthy of miraculous providence, for it has no blemish. How could this possibly happen? For they give rise to a pleasant fragrance. Here, Meir Simcha is referring to a previous idea he mentioned about how a perfume could be made up of many different ingredients, some of which did not have a pleasant smell in themselves, but when mixed together as an incense could have together a pleasant smell. And how does it work? That you have one individual with his fear of God. So you have some individuals who are very strong in the virtue of the fear of God, but perhaps in other aspects of their lives, they are relatively failures. That one with his righteousness, this one with his love of Israel. You have some people who they have a strong national tie to their fellow Jews, but perhaps are not so pious when it comes to more religious aspects. That one with his generosity, that one with his Torah study, and all of these individuals combine together into the national unit, which is the communal agent for the fulfillment of the Torah. This means that although the holy places have no intrinsic holiness, only God does, that doesn't mean that that concern for the holy places and connection to them doesn't play an essential role in achieving a religious ideal. And I think that the reason why Leibovitz was incapable of accepting these further explanations of Meir Simcha is because he had a very individualistic view of what it meant to perform the commandments, a kind of, dare I say, a Protestant kind of Judaism. Maimonides himself thought in terms of that the people on top, the elite, were kind of great religious philosophers and prophets as individuals. But even Maimonides, I think, had more of a communal view of Judaism than did Leibovitz. So I conclude in that I think there's something disingenuous in Leibovitz mentioning Meir Simcha's rejection of intrinsic holiness of holy places without mentioning that Meir Simcha nonetheless granted them a very important role in the fulfillment of Torah. Thank you very much. Here is my contact information if anyone would like to talk to me about this lecture.